There we go. Welcome everybody again. Thank you so much for joining us on a fairly dreich Wednesday evening. Mulled wine is optional, Fiona and our neighbours, but whatever you're drinking, hope you're nice and cosy and safe. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Alan Lynn. I'm the national coach for Scottish Swimming. Sadly, I probably won't have met that many of you because of the circumstances we find ourselves in at the moment, with very few competitions and very little movement around. But I hope we can all rectify that in the very near future, certainly into the new year, if all goes according to plan. We'll be back into a new competition framework and lots more opportunities for your sons and daughters to swim. I'm going to just share my screen and put on a PowerPoint. I'm joined, as you'll have heard if you've been listening to the not so whiffy banter between Jackthorpe and I earlier on. Jack's the Commonwealth Games medalist from 2018, a long-time Scottish senior international, very recently retired, but very much still part of the sport, and has been helping with a lot of our online stuff for the Senior and Youth Academy on a Sunday evening. Jack's going to talk to you from his perspective as a swimmer, the journey that he's gone on. And really all I'm going to do is I suppose, a brief intro towards that. It's a short session. We're going to just go for an hour or so. I want to give time for people to ask questions as opposed to just listen to Jack and I watering on. This is not, even though we're all on screen, it's not a talking at you session. So we'll try and make it as interactive as we can as we go. Normally this session would have taken place, at the start of what we used to call DRP, but what we now call Junior Academy, and I'm going to refer to that a wee bit later on in terms of the new structure. So we would have a parent session in each of the venues for DRP to set things up. This time around, given the circumstances and the fact that we have just the one face-to-face session at the weekend, felt it was more appropriate to do it at this end of this part of the season, in order to have let the other things happen. And by this time, I was hoping that we were going to be able to do the weekend, and given the circumstances that we're in, that certainly is the case. But it looked a wee bit dodgy there for a couple of days, but hopefully no more threats to that. So myself first, then Jack, and plenty of opportunity for interaction and questions. And I love this picture because it's you. Look, it's not you personally, I don't think, but this is you, hopefully in a few years' time, cheering your sons and daughters on at an international event. And this happened to be the Commonwealth Games in 2018, where, as I said, Jack won his medal. And these are the parents of the athletes on the team, the swimmers, the divers, the para swimmers, who were with us in Gold Coast. And just to give you a wee bit of context, the first session of heats on the 6 days of swimming had 10,000 people spectating. Probably, unless people go to the Olympics, the biggest crowd they'll ever swim in front of, heats and finals. So outdoors, lovely weather, obviously, in Australia at that time of year, 10,000 people watching. So that's you, hopefully in a few years' time. I picked up something today on an email newsletter that I'm on. This is from a guy who is a professor at Harvard University, and he was talking about how he learned about online teaching and online classes. So he said that he started to use these hashtags in the chat. So as we were going through, I'm not sure I understand. My watch is not cooperating. As we go through, if you feel minded to interact with the session, then put hashtag question, and Jack and I will field that depending upon who's talking at the time. Hashtag debate if you don't agree, and I'm more than happy that for some of you to disagree. That would be excellent if we get into some discussion on things tonight. Hashtag got it, a little bit of a thumbs up, or you can do that if you want, or a learning moment, as he described it, an aha moment. So for something that Jack or I say that you think, oh, that's pretty useful, then enter into the spirit of things and use those 4 hashtags. So question, debate, got it, or aha, and would be good fun. If you would humor us with that, that would be most appreciated. So here we go. Interactive. What is this and why is it relevant? Shove it in the chat. guessing you all know where it is, but why is it relevant? Why am I putting a picture of it up? The Kiwetin, yes, it is. Thank you, Lindsay Gibb. Yeah, it's not about nutrition, although it could have been, of course. It's a rocky road. It's full of ups and downs, Kelly. Yes, it is indeed. And I used this actual picture and slide with the swimmers, and when I ran my workshop session with them just a few weeks back, I think at the back end of October, and acknowledging the fact that, yeah, there are ups and downs, that it's not a smooth path. It's really important for us. I'm a parent, I'm a sports parent, not swimming, but in gymnastics, which is not too dissimilar in terms of commitment of time and so on. And I think it's really important that we recognise that things are not always going to go smoothly. We know this because we're adults, but the kids might not know that. So most people think that on the left-hand side that the road to success is nice and clear and straight, but we all know that along the way there are twists and there are turns, there are bumps, there are roadblocks, there are detours, there are failures. And I think at this point it's really important to acknowledge that failing is part of learning, failing is part of succeeding. And whether you like sports quotes from Michael Jordan or Andy Murray or anybody else, the truth of the matter is that the failures help you to be successful. And sometimes the failures are accidents and stuff that we weren't aware of. Sometimes, and I'm speaking now as the national coach and a former club and performance centre coach, those failures are designed by the coach in order to test and challenge the athletes, test the swimmers. And when I say failures, it might be that you go to a competition where you're not likely to win. You're up against really challenging opposition down south or abroad or even out of your own district. So those failures are normally designed to help everyone, to help the youngsters, help the swimmers learn. So I think we all recognise that that is the case. And this is a very contemporary example. And if I'm sure you all know who Emma Raducanu is, I've got a wee story about her in a sec, but I'll let you read this first. I couldn't sum up my philosophy any better than this contemporary example from Emma Raducanu, because although swimming is deemed an early specialisation sport and swimming takes a lot of commitment, I have and always will encourage young athletes, albeit maybe younger than some of the kids that you've got on the junior academy, but I would always encourage them, if they're in the school team for hockey or for football or rugby or whatever it happens to be, I would always encourage them to try and do that, because partly they're representing the school, partly they're playing with their friends or their pals, and also because it's really not that vital that they go to every single, I didn't used to think this, by the way, every single session and every single competition. It's important that they get a spread and that they balance things out with other sports. In fact, I haven't seen it yet, but I was reading a review of the King Richard movie that's out about the Williams sisters, and Will Smith plays the dad. And there are references to him not having them play in competitions because he didn't want them to be over competing at a young age. So it's really important that we recognise this multi-sport approach, this balanced approach, and that if we want people to stay in our sport longer, like Jack has done and others, then we need to give them space to be children, to play other sports. But ultimately, we hope to choose our sport, swimming, to stay involved with. It's a really fancy diagram, but I just shove it up to kind of make the point that from very early performance foundations right through to the top end, the top right-hand corner, there is a path, there is a journey, and wrapped through that, I'll talk more about training in a wee second, is what we call the daily training environment, coaching and facilities and so on. And on the left-hand side, you've got what we do in Scottish swimming, which is in the sort of pinky purpley colour, and then you've got in blue what the British swimming programme is, and there's an overlap. So the young people like Katie Shanahan, like Lucy Grieve, Evan Jones, and so on, are part of the what's called the world-class programme, but they're still very much a part of Scottish swimming. Duncan Scott, Olympic gold medalist, is a part of the world-class programme, but he's also still supported here in Scotland as part of the Scottish swimming national senior team. So it's a complex and changing environment, but there's a nice, at least clear direction for everybody to head in. And the key things, I'm not going to go into any of these in particular detail, but these are the things that are important in their evolution and their development. So daily training environment, the pool that they're in, the coach that they have, the club that they're part of, the support network around them, etc. All of that is really important. I'll talk about mindset and behaviours just in a wee sec. If I was to emphasise one thing above all else, would be process over outcome. Learning that the process is way, way more important than the time they did, the medal they won, the champion they became, or whatever. That's not important. Nobody cares who wins when they're 14. You can look at pictures and they can have medals in their room and so on, but we want them winning when they're 24. And often the people who are successful at a young age, because they have been successful and haven't failed, don't stick around long enough. So process over outcome, technique, training, habits, behaviours, much more important. Be realistic in your expectations, you and your coach. There's a balance between training and competition. Over competing is not a good thing. You need to set a foundation in training. I mentioned success and failure. I've talked, and I always will, through this short presentation about support. And there are key transitions. Primary school to secondary school is an obvious one. Secondary school to another destination post-school at 16, 17 or 18 is a further one. And we help to support the young athletes with all of those. And whether they're part of a national programme or not, there's lots of advice and lots of support around for them. Lovely picture of Duncan winning his Commonwealth Games gold medal. And I've attributed the quote to him. It's not necessarily something that he said, but Jack and I know him really well, and he would ascribe to this for sure. Never believe that you are the best. Always believe you can be the best. And that's the process over outcome stuff. So if you think you've made it, you haven't really. You need to keep striving to be better and better. The very best still want to be better, whether it's swimming a perfect race or doing a faster time or simply winning something again in a repetitive way, like the recently retired Hannah Miley talked about in her press release this morning. Really important that you don't believe that you've done it, that you are the best, that you always believe you can be the best and be better. So nice image and message to send from Duncan. Our performance plan in Scottish swimming covers these four things. Just briefly, development, technique, coaching, and environments. Those are four foundations. We call them centre lanes, but they're four foundations for everyone, whether they're on the national programme or whether they're in clubs. And just want to reference that for you. I talked about mindset, and these are the 5 key areas that are referred to. I'll show you the book that these things come from in a sec. But effort, challenge, setback, feedback, and ownership. And there's 2 columns there. I'm going to quickly cover one of them over because we don't really want people with a fixed mindset. We don't want people who are doing the things that I've just covered over. We want your young swimmers, your sons and daughters, to work hard in the areas that are going to make the biggest difference. Don't rest on their laurels. Don't avoid things that they're not so good at. Embrace the challenges. Take the attitude that they sometimes can't do it yet. And that's a lovely, simple 3-letter word that you can use all the time if they get upset or disappointed about something. They can't do it yet. Setbacks are part of learning. Talked about success and failure. And sometimes those setbacks are designed in order to create a learning moment. We would always encourage the swimmers to ask questions. And I'll certainly, when I visit, I'm going to be a wee bit like the person in the helicopter when the Scottish Cup gets presented or the League Championship gets presented on the last day of the season. I'm going to be at all 4 full districts over the weekend, spending time with all of the programmes. And I'll be looking for swimmers to be asking questions and using feedback from the coaches to help them improve. It's not about what we can give them. It's about what they know and understand and ask questions of us to be better. And we want them to take responsibility. So if you're packing their swim bag, filling their water bottle, get them to do it. I know it's hard. As I said, I'm a parent. You want to do things for your kids, but the sooner we get them to take ownership for what they're doing, the better. And I'm sure Jack will talk about that just in a wee sec. And this is a piece of work that was done by UK Sport, but your role, if we look at you, which is in orange, your role doesn't diminish, but it lessens as they get older or they get into higher levels of performance. But you still have a role to play. The coach's role probably increases through that if you see the blue line going up. And of course, there are other people who have an influence on them, like their teachers at school or the peers who can have an impact on them too. And it's a nice representation of how you continue to be a central part of them in the way that you're uniquely placed as a parent, but other people have a varying role and an increasing or decreasing role depending upon who they are as they develop. I mentioned books. So book on the left, some of you will know Tony Stanger. I remember him as a rugby player, but he's also got his own business in and out of sport, sort of executive coaching and talent development and so on. And this is a lovely book. I think it's about £4.99 on all good booksellers. And it's a really nice, simple way of demonstrating some of the messages that I'm talking about, and Jack will. And the mindset stuff comes from a Stanford psychologist, Carol Dweck, who has done the research that leads us to things like fixed and growth mindset that I showed you just a slide or two ago. This is the national team. Proudly there, Jack at the back before he shaved his beard off. Commonwealth Games, me just about in shot. I like to stay in the background and let the swimmers take centre stage, but that was us before we went into the village for the Commonwealth Games in 2018. And I simply put that there almost as an aspiration, because your sons and daughters are not quite at the age or stage of being on that yet, but they could be, and in many cases I hope they should be. Why do we have a national programme? So I'm winding up here and I'm going to talk about what they've been doing on the junior academy, but the national programme is to provide opportunities for swimmers to learn, not to get t-shirts or caps. It's to learn. I'm sure they'll get somewhere along the line, whether it's at district or at national level, but it's really not that important. I say that and then everybody loves to get some, but we're providing opportunities for them to learn, for them to race, whether that's within the programme, and some of them will be racing against each other at the moment in league matches and so on. Help them, as I said before, to transition and develop, whether it's from junior academy to youth or into the national junior team. And a key thing, which is perhaps sometimes forgotten, is to help to accelerate the development of coaches. That could be the club coach, if it's somebody who's not had a swimmer at that level before, or you'll see lots of coaches around that, things like junior academy and national junior team. Sometimes more coaches than it looks are necessary, but they are there to learn as much as the athletes are. And it's not just, oh, well, I'm doing well, so my coach comes with me. No, there's opportunities for everybody to learn and develop. And just some images to show you the sorts of things that go on. So this was a DRP day. For those of you who are in the Midland district, you might recognise Forfar. It's an academy or high school anyway, the school at Forfar, where we've had DRP in the Midlands and being led by Victoria Milburn there. This is what we used to call a YDS, the Youth Development Squad, but is now Youth Academy. And that's us down in Swansea in Wales. You can tell the Scots in red and the Welsh in, Scots in blue and the Welsh in red. And that's a coach's briefing ahead of the session, which involves something like, my memory serves, 70 swimmers, mixed Scottish and Welsh swimmers, sort of 14 to 17 years of age in a training camp situation down there. And we reciprocated the following year in Aberdeen when they all came up. This is senior team, obviously training really hard there out in Gold Coast in 2017 and a training camp ahead of the Commonwealth Games. And then lastly, a much more recent picture. This is the meet in Geneva, which the youth squad or the national junior team, as they now are, will be going to in January, COVID restrictions permitting. And this is the sort of little bit of Scotch corner where the physio and the sports science team are helping the swimmers to prepare before they go to race. So all of this is mixed up as the sort of experience that we try to give on the national programme. I'm going to put all of these up because they don't need an awful lot more explaining. The sorts of things that we operate on the national programme are horizontal camps to meet, so similar age groups, people of 14 or 15, vertical camps where maybe you're swimming alongside Duncan Scott or Lucy Hope, Kathleen Dawson, because you're on a vertical stroke camp with them. We do run other stroke camps and clinics, and there's more of that to come next year. And we run camps for females only. Project Ilsa is something you may have heard of, where we run things in a bespoke manner. And then the high challenge, high support comes with things like Geneva that I've just showed you the picture of, or US Nationals that Jack was at a couple of years ago. It's a higher level experience of racing against some of the best swimmers in the world. So that's all to come in the national programme. What we have done for them is to create this new structure. So Junior Academy, where your kids are, the Youth Academy, which is the older version of that, Senior Academy, older again, and then we have the National Junior Team and the National Senior Team, where the very best junior athletes and senior athletes are given some of those experiences that I talked about. And it's a lovely picture of Hannah. Because she retired today, she's come all the way through. I remember seeing Hannah Miley when she was 6. I was running a breaststroke camp for Scottish swimming up in Geary and in Inverurie, and Hannah was there as I think a 6 or 7-year-old. And the rest is history. If you read what her biog says, all those medals, 28 international medals. The only one missing from her collection is an Olympic medal, and she was 0.15 of a second away from that in Rio. I was there, saw her, cried with her dad afterwards, her coach, in the agony of coming so close. But that's all to come. But Hannah started at DRP. In fact, it wasn't called that in those days. It was called Pathway to Performance. And she came all the way through to 28 international medals. So lots to look forward to for your own sons and daughters. Bringing us right up to date. You know what we've done. We've done practical and workshops online over 2 sessions, which was the best we could manage given the circumstances. We've got face-to-face at Glasgow, Glenrothes, Dundee and Aberdeen this weekend, which I'm really looking forward to. And there are opportunities then for them to engage and to commit to improving and to learning. That's part of what they're doing. Sorry, I've gone one too many. And it's not about me at all in all of this. It's about the swimmers, but my goals, if you like. If somebody said to me, what would success look like for that whole national programme, but in particular for the Junior Academy, then I would say it's about giving swimmers, coaches and parents a positive experience in our sport. I've been involved in this sport for nearly 50 years. I know you can't believe that. I look much younger. But that's a long time to be involved in something, and it's a positive experience, giving me a fantastic set of opportunities, man and boy. Keep people involved, swimmers, coaches, parents, for longer. That's a real key goal for me. Success for me is people sticking around. Some of the swimmers who I coached, I've been at their weddings and the christenings of their kids and so on. That's really important, that we stick around and that the relationships last a long time. Obviously, as national coach, I try to have performances, so increase the pool that our national team athletes come from. But that's only a part of it. And lastly, I think really importantly, I know it's very much a part of what people do in education these days, but all of the things that we're doing are around teaching the swimmer skills that will help them be successful, whether that's confidence, whether it's resilience, whether it's discipline, whether it's time management and organisation. Those are my goals for the national programme and for this part of the national programme, the Junior Academy. So that's it for me. I'm going to take a wee pause and see if there's any questions, and give Jack time to get himself organised. What we are, we're over 60 people, which is fantastic. If anyone's got any questions, there's nothing in the chat. Nobody was brave enough to use the hashtag, so I'll thank Adam Grant for that another time. If you want to ask a question, just unmute yourself, because that's what would happen if we were face to face on a Junior Academy day somewhere across the country. Stunned into silence, Jack. I don't believe it. That mulled wine must be calling everybody. They're like, shut up, Al, and get on with it. I'll answer anything. I'm an open book.
Alan, it's Derek Cowie, Fraser Cowie's dad here. How is the programme going to develop, not develop, but move on from this?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. So obviously we did what we did this time around because of the circumstances. From next year, we'll run again all face-to-face sessions, but because of the success of the workshops and the online academy that Jack's been involved in on the Sunday, we're going to continue with that. It's almost like going to be an academy curriculum, if you like, but focused around the swimming. So whether it'll be some of those skills that I talked about or something a wee bit more technical. So we will run the junior academy will have 3 face-to-face days in the way that we would have done previously. They'll be fairly local. There'll probably be 2 in the west, 2 in the east, 1 in Midlands and 1 or 2 in the north. And that will allow the swimmers to have those 3 single days with experienced lead coaches, with their own club coaches and with senior swimmers to heighten the learning experience for them. So that's where we'll go from here. And beyond that, obviously all the other parts of the programme that I talked about are going to develop much more on face-to-face basis as well. So stroke next season there'll be stroke clinics, not in the same way. I want there to, essentially my thing is, if we think that the national programme works, then we should do it more often with more people. That will be a feature of what we do going forward. So whether it's in the junior academy, whether it's in the youth senior academy, or indeed the national junior or senior team, I want more contact. I want the programme to be more meaningful. I want it to add more value to what people have got, not to replace it, but to add more value. So if I was to summarise what it is, it's going to be more than before, and it's going to try and accelerate and enhance the learning and development of the swimmers as best we can. The next part of the season is going to be about racing. It's going to be about competing rather than about coming together for training purposes. And then from the summer onwards, we'll kick on with the programme, the full version of it.
And also, how are they going to be able to qualify for this?
They will be
going to be restructured again, or
a wee bit. Not essentially, it'll be the same. There'll be time standards, yes. And there will be opportunities for coaches to. We didn't really get to do this because of COVID, for coaches to nominate people as well. So this is not an exact science, and because somebody does a time at 11 or 12, doesn't mean anything or predict anything other than that's where they are at that moment in time. So sometimes when I go and visit programs, I see kids with really good technique, but they're maybe a later developer. So they might not have the times, but they've got all of the other performance behaviours, techniques, and so on. So there'll be an opportunity to qualify objectively. There'll also be an opportunity for coaches to nominate people subjectively. We'll be asking for evidence of that, commentary, obviously, about their attitude and their behaviours, their commitment. But also, if we can, and the technology allows some video of them swimming so that we can actually see them in action rather than just be looking at a set of times on a spreadsheet.
There's a wee bit in line with that. I just wonder.
You've just gone on mute, Wendy, accidentally, I think.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, so it's a wee bit in line with that, but how are you still on mute? Am I?
No, you're fine, you're okay.
Cool. Yeah, how are you planning on actually measuring the success of the programme, you know, that now that you're changing it quite a bit just now?
Well, one success will be more swimmers involved. And like I said, those 4 things that I ended up with, for me, it's about the quality of what we are able to offer on the programme, the success of that. And it's a nice reminder, thank you, that there's a survey going out to the swimmers next week, which will help them to give us some feedback on everything that there's been thus far. And I'm sure a lot of it will be, well, we want more face-to-face, and I totally get that. But we always do this, even although we've had limited opportunity, we always do the feedback after day 3. And that helps us to build the picture to if you like, shape the next year's programme. So success for me will be more people involved, it'll be better quality, and it will be retaining people longer through the whole of the programme. You know, it's nice if previously they made DRP, but we want them to stick around. We track everybody when they come into the programme, so Junior Academy or DRP as was, we start to track them, and we have a spreadsheet of everybody, I think for the last 15, 16 years, who's come in, how long they've stayed, where they've made the jump, so the twists and turns, if you like. Some people, Jack will know, because one of his teammates, Callum Tate, was never involved in any of the squads as a youngster, but eventually made it to the Commonwealth Games. So he was in DRP, but he missed everything else out and then ended up back in the national senior team. So we track that, and the success of that is, for me anyway, people sticking around longer.
Okay, thanks.
We track lots of other stuff too, but I'm not so fussed on the numbers of British champions and rankings and all that. That shows progress, but in the end, for me, it's a bit more subjective than that. Here's the questions. Thank you. Oh, I knew somebody was going to ask about spectators, and I'm absolutely gutted that we can't get any of that at the moment. I'm torn because, as I said, my son's a gymnast, and I've been to Wales to watch him competing twice recently, and yet we can't have spectators at swimming events here. It's a limit that the venues are putting on us, rather than it's anything that we're deciding to do. So I was hoping that things would improve to the point that we might have had people at the National League finals or the winter meet next weekend, but it doesn't look as if that's going to happen. But listen, I'm hoping that into the new year, Janet, that we can get people in, because it's soul destroying to drop them off at a pool and know they're going to race and not be able to see them. So I totally understand everyone's frustration with that, and if we could do something about it, we definitely would. And Snags is happening in Glasgow and Tollcross next year, and I hope to goodness that we've got the stands packed with people watching Snags, which is a fantastic event. Fiona, opportunity to sit on lingerie. Yeah, that's part of that vertical camp stuff, Fiona, that I was talking about. We definitely want to do that, not necessarily just right up at the top end, but at the lower end as well. That's very much in my plans for the new year, if we can get the venues released to be able to do that. Maybe not so much with the junior academy this time around, but from next year onwards, be able to do that for them as well. And Jenny Boyd, thank you again. It's a lovely question that allows me to say that from next season on, we will be running through the whole season with the whole of the national programme. It's always been again a frustration of mine that we did certain things in the autumn and then nothing after that. So the national junior team, which is brand new, is going to run all the way through to June next year. The youth and senior academy, having been online, we'll have some face-to-face stuff in the spring next year, and hopefully we can extend things for the junior academy beyond that as well. Of course, things like school and other competitions and exams get in the way of that for some of the older ones, but within the constraints that we have, I would like things to run much, much longer through the whole season. Right, Jack, I think we're better hear from you. You get a much more interesting story to tell than I have. I introduced Jack earlier on. He's originally from the M&B club an area. He's a graduate at the University of Edinburgh. He's doing a master's degree there, and has been helping us out with a whole bunch of stuff, which is not necessarily all relevant just now. But he's a very experienced swimmer, very experienced at talking to parents and swimmers. In fact, he's going to be at Tollcross all day on Saturday. So for those of you with children in the West District, they'll get the benefit of listening to Jack as well. Sadly, they'll also get the benefit of being coached by me, but never mind, you can't have everything. Jack.
Let's just that on. So vibes today, I'll go over kind of a 15-minute or so presentation, like a version of what I'll be presenting on Saturday, with a wee bit of mix of journey and some of the content and delivery we've been providing to the online academy sessions that Al mentioned. So from there, I think I'll just jump in and crack on. And I guess at any point you can fire away with questions or wait for pause at the end, of course, whatever suits. So can everyone see that? Or is that all good? Yeah, magic. Yeah, so this is kind of the contents of what we'll be going over on Saturday, more in depth. I mean, it'll be very much a summary today. But really, above all else, if I was going to kind of summarize my journey thus far, perseverance through adversity with a positive mindset are the foundations for long-term success. Really honing in with what Alan talked about there, with kind of the most opportunistic learning experiences really are from the moments of hardship and unpredictability, and really learning from mistakes and learning from kind of the most negative situations and how you can flip that around. And I think I'll really be drawing in on that today and some of the key points that I'll be making, and touching on my kind of bumpy, rocky road of a journey all over, and ups and downs, different events and opportunities and challenges, but we'll get into that. So first and foremost, there's I think maybe a 10-year-old me from back in the day. So I should highlight that my original sort of speciality was 200 breaststroke, 1500 freestyle, bit of IM, kind of jack of all trades, master of none, if you like. Just the way it went back then, and it really links into what Emma was talking about in her experiences. I was doing all sorts of sports and wasn't really finding what suited, and it really was a kind of a bumpy journey, and it took a long time to really finalize what I was eventually ended up specializing in, which was 50 freestyle and 100 freestyle. So I went from kind of one end of the spectrum right to the other end, from kind of 16 years old, which is when I kind of got half decent or a level that I might be able to go somewhere, up until 18. And Alan mentioned Callum Tate. He's a great example, from a teammate from MMB. We swam together since we were tiny and all the way up, and we were kind of outliers, trailblazers, if you like, in terms of never really fitting in the program very well in terms of the lower end stuff, but we ended up in a great place at the end of the day. And it just shows again that just because it's not happening now doesn't mean it won't happen yet, as Alan pointed out, that key word. And I really will be emphasizing that, because I was a slow burner, but I think I've learned so much from it and developed as a person as a whole as well. I like outlasted all of my younger peers by a fair bit, over a decade in some instances, as it ended up being, but you know, that's a story to tell as we go. So away from the early years, I will say that in the middle there, on the Saturday session, I'll be expanding significantly around school transitions and kind of from there to now, but for the purposes of today, it kind of brings us closer to the more relevant stuff in terms of where I am now. Like I said, Edinburgh, 2012 to present, as Alan mentioned, pursuing an MSc in performance psychology, and that kind of really hones into a subject I'm extremely passionate about, that we'll get onto. But the biggest thing for me was finding my way in terms of the transitions. There were some major transitions that I went through, you know, from national fives to hires into university, and if there was anything to look back on, it would be expanding on that a wee bit earlier. If I could learn, if I could go back and tell myself, or younger me or younger athletes, which is what we focus on in the academy online sessions, is how to really become aware of these skills earlier, how to sort yourself out, how to learn to balance that student athlete lifestyle. It's a skill, and it's a difficult skill, but it can be done. But again, if I was aware of it when I was younger, I would have been much more attentive to it. And student athlete or athlete student's a great way to look at it. The sport of swimming, they quite often go hand in hand, and the way I saw it was a kind of sliding scale of prioritization that I learned as I got older, how to manage those key points of competitive opportunity as well as academic opportunity. But again, it took me a long time. When I first arrived at Edinburgh, I didn't really have anything to do with the academic side. I was all about, right, where's a swimming pool, point me in the direction, off I go. And it did take me several years to really understand that you need to find the balance there. It's not all about going all in on that one opportunity. But again, that's some stuff and opportunity I'll lean into on Saturday for the athletes open up there. This is just a nice photo from 2014. Fast forward a few years, this was my Commonwealth Games alongside teammate Kieran McGuckin, who's actually opened up a swim school now, which is fantastic. It's again leaning into his strengths, and this just highlights when I peaked. Initially, when I was younger, 2014, I was 19. From there to kind of commies 2018, there was a lot of hardship in the middle, but I really struggled for several years after those commies. Like, I achieved a time that took me years to beat in the long course, 50 freestyle and 100 freestyle. It took a long time. And there was plenty of times in between where I thought might be done. And probably one of the biggest moments when I thought I'd be done was when I had a freak accident, dropped a knife on my foot in my kitchen. Again, that was a couple of years off the back of 2014 and needed reconnective surgery. It was months and months of rehabilitation and excruciating needlework, all sorts of stuff. And I lost mobility in the foot. It was 5 days out from British Championships at the time, and initially I was misdiagnosed. They thought I just cut my foot, and turned up to the meet and had virtually no function in my toes and my foot. And JT at the time, Jonathan, the head of physio at Scottish Swimming, said, "Jack, this is a major concern. We need to get this sorted." Went to Sheffield, where it was at the time, the Western General, and they said, "Yeah, you need surgery like yesterday." got back to Edinburgh, got it sorted, and long road to recovery. And if we're thinking of that perseverance through adversity, this epitomizes it for me, because I went through a lot in the kind of 6 months of that road to recovery, rocky as it was in terms of the rehabilitation, getting back on track, and took time out of university. But what eventually led from what could have been a career-ending injury and periods of rehabilitation was probably among my greatest successes. So again, that really links into that development of behaviors and resilience, and to really learn from the opportunities of, well, this is a horrible situation. What can I do? What am I learning from this? And again, it took me a long time to realize those moments of hardship are more defining, more character defining than your greatest successes. And that's epitomized here with 2018, even 2017, the year before, made World University Games, final there. Huge, fantastic success at the 2018 Commonwealth Games with a medal and individual finals. And then even in 2019 and 20, Alan mentioned the US Nationals, regained a position in the national squad, the national goal squad at the time, and continued right through lockdown. And it just goes to show that my peak years were actually right at the end of my career. I finished a few months ago, and I was arguably in the last 18 months at my absolute best. But, you know, that just kind of epitomizes that it might not be happening now, but, you know, it could happen. And for me, it's worth sticking around to see what could happen. So before we get into some kind of details of where we are now, what I've learned or what I've taken away from this, the best predictor of self-confidence is perceived readiness. So it's kind of a message I've been trying to instill in the online academy sessions in terms of skills we've been delivering, and kind of messages of how can you really be as self-confident, as ready as possible, and really building a framework and building blocks around that. And that's, we'll get into a little bit on that, but if I was really looking back and said to myself, you know, how can I turn this negative into a positive situation? How can I reframe? How can I learn from those mistakes? And that striving for that simultaneous academic and sporting pursuit is extremely important, and it can pay off. It opened doors to, well, for me in MSc, I never thought I would go down that line. I never even thought originally I would go to university. I just didn't really consider it in the same way. And I think, again, if I'd been a bit more aware at the time, as a younger me, I would have really embraced it a bit more. And speaking of embracing that adversity, you know, that it can really be as defining or more defining in terms of your character for the long term than the greatest victory. And I guess that last quote there, if you've always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got, is a nice one for me in terms of trying new things, leaning into that, those challenges. And, you know, there's only one way of learning, it's doing something different. So I guess that leads to where am I now? And again, leaning into, if I could go back, my passion is performance and getting the best out of myself and those around me. And I think, as Alan kind of elaborated, the work we've been doing with the academy athletes and the message we've been trying to get across is what I would have wanted to have when I was that age. You know, I was thinking back to my experiences, and back at the time, I think it was junior silver, no, it was youth silver or something. We'd have camps over Christmas, the festive period, and I just remember thinking being in a hole of just horrible training cycle. It was hard work, but I knew what I was doing was worth it. But I was thinking back, you know, what could I have learned a bit more at the time? And if there's anything that I've learned from different pieces of research and work from different bodies and organizations, is the athletes have a lot to give and a lot to offer. And learning from those experiences is kind of, those are little golden nuggets. And that's really what I've been trying to do over the last few months, and hopefully will continue to do. And it leads on to really thinking about excellence that Alan mentioned, those behaviors. For me, this was a great quote, or a great way to think about it. What does excellence look like? Well, perfection is not attainable, but if we chase perfection, we can achieve excellence. And I think learning to accept that perfection is not attainable, because who can ever really define perfection or claim they have achieved perfection? But excellence is something you can achieve. Excellence in the way you conduct yourself, approach your sport, approach your life as a whole. And some of these skills, if it's how you juggle your daily life and you balance these plates of opportunity, whether it's school and academic pursuits with exams and racing opportunity, that's really epitomizes what we're trying to lean into. in the academy in terms of developing these excellence behaviours. So this sort of framework here is what I've been working in with the help of Zoe and Alan into these opportunities, these online sessions, to really encapsulate what it takes to be an elite level athlete or strive to be an elite level athlete. And a lot of these behaviours, I would say, are also transferable in terms of, you know, you can see a lot of stuff there in terms of the planning and organisation. That goes across the board. That's a life skill. And again, Alan mentioned Rocky Roads. The Rocky Roads success is actually defined within a paper, the research that these behaviours originate from, psychological characteristics of developing excellence. So he kind of hit the nail on the head there in terms of what you're doing and how you're developing through periods of hardship kind of encapsulates these excellence behaviours. And this leads on to kind of how you manage your moments just before the race, the call room. This is an opportunity. This is a slide from the most recent session, call room behaviours. So for me, call room behaviours are what you're doing in the kind of final 20 minutes in the marshalling area, the final 30 minutes. The final phases can really be the make or break in terms of the last 2, 3, 4, 10 years of build up. I remember going back to the 2018 commies, the call room there was intense, extremely intense. 10:30 at night, the rain had been pouring down. It was just an intense environment. And I thought, oh, everything I've learned up to this point has been useful, but I still could have coped a wee bit better thinking back. And again, these are some of the examples that I'll be leaning into, and a bit of opportunity for some discussion and activity on the Saturday to really present to the athletes, what do you do in your call room? How are you conducting yourself? How could you improve? What sort of skills do you lean into? Is your music? What are your pre-performance routines? All this stuff, kind of what I've been working on. And for me, it's epitomised in the call room. You know, talking there about stand up straight with your shoulders back. That's Jordan Peterson, a psychologist, and posture is important. Psychological meets the physiological. And I think there's no one better than Anthony Irvine that kind of epitomised that in Cannes in 2016, prior to the Olympics competition opportunity. It was in the call room, and there's all sorts that goes on in the kind of senior level 50 freestyle. There's people jumping around, slapping themselves, shouting. There's all sorts of stuff. It's just an eclectic mix of folk. And rocks up Irvine with his slides and nothing on his legs other than his suit and a t-shirt. He's not a care in the world, and immediately starts poking fun at people and just embracing the environment. And he didn't even perform very well, which made it even funnier. But then fast forward 2 months and he's got an Olympic gold medal and one of the greatest comeback stories ever. And there's everything in between. And the real lesson there is there's no right or wrong approach. I've swum at my absolute fastest when I've been absolutely laser focused, completely pumped up, and then also at my complete and most relaxed. But for me, it was learning what works and when to apply these in certain situations. And that's the biggest takeaway for a young athlete, is just because someone's jumping around and trying to psych you out doesn't mean there's not a way you can cope with that just before the absolute critical moment of trying to produce your most peak performance that really demonstrates your best self. With all that said, where are we going? Well, Alan kind of hinted at it a little bit, or suggested the direction, and really hope that some of what we've been doing can rub off on people in the right way. Even if it's just to one athlete, I think all of this is worth doing. These talks that I give, even if just one little nugget that kind of hits home and lands in the right way. And even with the academy sessions, if there's a way to expand out from that. We only scratched on call rooms, for example. I think that could be a whole module in itself. There could be lots of stuff to talk about. There's all sorts of experiences to be learned there, and really it's engaging with athletes of what's worked for them, what hasn't, why, and really learning. It's the how and the why to the what in terms of that process versus outcome that can be so overarchingly important. And again, at the ages that your sons and daughters will be at, I mean, I think back sort of 14 through to 16, I wasn't producing much. I mean, Alan might testify to that. I really wasn't doing a whole lot. But I think if there was an opportunity like Scottish Swimming are kind of leading with these sessions, and the way that the academies are evolving to really open up the door to these excellence behaviours, just leans into the testament of how far they've come. And I hope that there's plenty more to come around that. So I think that kind of hits the nail on the head for me. A little bit of content there. Hope that was interesting enough.
Thank you.
Time for questions if there's any.
Yeah, every swimmer that we get to do these sessions has a different story to tell. And I didn't know Jack was going to show the Gory Pictures. If somebody wrote hashtag ouch, never mind anything else, Jack. So yeah, it was a stark reminder of how difficult it can be. That was an accidental bump in the road. It was more than a bump in the road. It was a blinking roadblock. So, but the help and support that you got is part of what happens at that level too. JT, who you mentioned just in passing, is a lead physio for us, and he's excellent. He leads the way, but he also treats people whenever they need it. He helped Kathleen Dawson to come back after a knee injury to obviously winning the gold medal at Olympics this year. And we have a team of people all around the country, not just JT, but people like him in the institutes across Scotland, who, once your sons and daughters reach national junior team or senior team level, have access to that kind of support, not just physio, but lots of other things besides. But we don't want to start it then. We want to keep going, providing opportunities. So whether it's nutrition or priming or warming up or psychology and all of the things that we've been doing with the Youth and Senior Academy, we want to bring that into the Junior Academy's curriculum, if I can call it that, for the next season as well. So Jack, thank you for sharing a story. Some lovely comments in the chat, and yeah, much more to come on that. So questions, anyone, if you've got any to Jack, or some more difficult ones that you've thought up for me?
Hi Alan, it's Jackie here. Hi.
You know all the answers to the questions. What are you coming on asking me questions for?
I was asked Jack that given his own experience and things that he said that you maybe wish he knew maybe as a younger child as well, what advice then can he give the parents that are on this presentation for in terms of the support that they can give their children, and maybe a bit of advice that they should be partaking to their children to make sure or to try and give their child as much longevity in swimming as they can?
Yeah, well, if there was 3 pieces of advice that I would want to give my mum and dad thinking back: importance of nutrition, importance of sleep, and learning how to balance the dual career commitments. Remember back in the day, like, my nutrition just was not in the right place. No fault of their own, they just didn't fully understand what it took and the level and how important sleep was. I mean, I did a whole session in the academy about the importance of sleep, the performance catalyst, the performance killer, and at the young developmental ages of a lot of the kids, or the young sons and daughters of yourselves, will be, there's recommendations in the region of 10 to 11 hours. It's crazy. It's not necessarily realistic, but there's little things like that. And it's just informing yourselves as much as possible, almost applying your learned experiences in the workplace. That can be applied in terms of how to manage and organize, because it's really the foundation of, again, getting yourself sorted, and that realm can really help you facilitate the long term for performance opportunity in the pool, I found. Kind of really sketched over that, but
no, those are 3 really good messages. As a parent, I can subscribe to all 3 of those, and quite frankly, particularly the sleep one. I'm sure most of you will agree. Getting your kids to sleep and not having their devices in the room and all of that is a challenge these days that certainly I never had. I had a telephone, I used to dial the thing around like that. Anyway, enough of my age. Couple of really good questions here, Jack. Bye, Claire. Have a nice time at the waterfront. Long-term athlete development not be highlighted to all parents, or some kids might not be identified at a young age. I mean, I have lived experience of that, and Jack's given us his version of that. The best female athlete I ever coached came to the sport at 15, was an international gymnast, funnily enough, is now a coach, and she made the Commonwealth Games final, having come to me as a 15-year-old who couldn't dive in or do a tumble turn. So yeah, people do develop much later, and for different reasons. The bump in the road for her was an injury that stopped her doing gymnastics, and she came to swimming because her mum was keen for her to do that. So yeah, I think things like this, and obviously we'll take feedback from everybody, are part of the solution to what you're saying there about highlighting stuff to parents. there should be a curriculum for parents, and I don't mean it takes you back to school, because that'd be trivializing the important messages that I think parents need to get, and maybe the ones who need to hear it are not on the call. Maybe you guys are the enlightened few who are here because you're keen and committed and you want to learn for your kids. Maybe it's like school parents' nights. Maybe the ones that we want to see are actually not on the call. We need to encourage them to be on the call as well, so that they get the same messages. And Ruth's asking about Jack's journey. Will everyone hear it? Well, of course, the West District guys will hear it direct, firsthand. This is being recorded, and we will make it available to everybody, as we have done with all of the academy sessions. So, yeah, this is open house. There's nothing to be hidden behind paywalls or any of the rest of it. This is going to be available to the sport for people to see and hear, even if they didn't hear it live. Fiona has her hand up very politely.
Jack, I wondered what support you got from teachers and things at school, because obviously the training required for the athletes is massive commitment, early morning sessions, after school sessions. Did you get support from your teachers? Is there any advice you can give us as parents and what we should be asking schools in terms of support?
In a word, no, I didn't. But maybe that was just at the time. I think even when I went to university, it was kind of not a thing to be splitting years and doing things a bit differently. But if there was, again, thinking back to the teachers, and if I would be able to ask them for a wee bit of support around certain areas, it's almost the napping as well. Like sometimes if a child, or if I was absolutely exhausted, sometimes falling asleep in class just for a few minutes can make a big difference. I know that sounds mad, but sometimes it is actually necessary. And then as I got a wee bit older, towards kind of 5th and 6th year, there was sometimes opportunity in terms of the free periods and stuff. But in all honesty, I just learned kind of the hard way how to really be brutal with applying my time effectively. Like I've got vivid memories of studying from at the time, standard grades and then hires, and it was just any waking moment that I had between sessions or after. And I kind of really got into that mindset early from that point of view. So again, I've laying the importance of the foundations of that, of you can be effective with small windows of time, but it's just identifying those windows can be the tricky bit. There's only so many hours in the day, but yeah, it's a hard question.
Yeah, and that will be I'm sure something, if you haven't come across it yet, you will do. And some schools, definitely things are better now, Jack. I think you know that from conversations that we've had, and schools are much more accommodating now. They talk about young people, they don't talk about pupils. They talk about encouraging them to be the best that they can be in all aspects of their life, whether it's swimming or another sport or music or art and so on. And having a son who's just finished high school, I can certainly testify to the fact that I was pleasantly surprised with the experience that he had in his high school, which is completely contrary to what Jack was describing there in his time. And we deal with the younger athletes on the national programme, and we've talked to them about their plans and their transitions and the balancing school and sport, and mostly it's a positive picture. Some schools are less flexible than others, just like I suppose some aspects of life are better than others. So but overall it's a much better picture than it was even the short time ago that Jack was at school.
There was another question there, Alan, about Vicky. It was interesting, how can we enable to hear from Jack? Is there any way to share those or just direct towards the recorded stuff already?
I think so, yeah. I mean, we've obviously got some, you and I, some talking to do about what we do moving into the new year. But yeah, all of the academy sessions are available on YouTube. If they aren't, I'll check that out tomorrow. But we've been putting the stuff up, so anything that we've done, it's all been recorded, is available. And if it would help, we can always chop things up into smaller sections, and they don't want to hear from me, they want to hear from Jack, or they want to hear from Zoe, or they want whatever it needs to be, then we can certainly try to do that. But yeah, everything should be available to them. That's us bang on an hour from when we started, so that's nice timing, Jack. Thank you. I'm impressed that some of you have stayed around, haven't been tempted by the mulled wine in the street. What kind of street do you live on? It has mulled wine and biscuits outside. My goodness.
It's an older residential street. It's like, yeah.
I think we're all coming round there, Fiona, for a glass of mulled wine. James is asking, yeah, we just got some membership figures in today, James, from the office, and things are gradually climbing again. I mean, obviously, if kids haven't been learning to swim, those kids haven't been graduating from learning to swim into clubs. So inevitably, there's going to be a bit of catching up is necessary in post-COVID. Our figures are not quite as bad in terms of dropping off particular ages than maybe we had feared. If I give you some measure of what's happening in other in other parts of the world, USA Swimming reckon that they've lost 60,000 12 and unders during COVID. That's just in membership terms. Now, obviously, our figures are nothing like as big as that in the first place, but it is a concern that those kids who are probably at the back end of primary school maybe didn't get back into the swimming club as soon as we would have all wanted, and have been tempted by other sports that they maybe could do before they got back to swimming. But it's our job across the sport to make sure that we provide a positive and welcoming environment for them to come back to, or that they are now back to, and keep them involved for longer. So if there has been a drop, it's our job to try and pick that up and to close the gap, if you like, on what the membership should be. But the membership is gradually creeping back up across Scottish swimming. So we're not quite at 20,000 yet, but we're very, very close. And I think that compares really favourably with what we were doing as we built up to what the high was, I think, in 2018-19. So we're on the move. It's a positive growth. And hopefully those racing opportunities that are coming from January onwards will provide an attractive option for people to do in addition to some of the other sports that they take part in. That's as optimistic as I think I can be. I'm always a glass half full guy anyway. Thank you, Alistair. Kira. Lovely. If there's no more questions, I'll just say another thank you to Jack. We've got a good wee double act going here, so we'll take it on the road at the weekend. And if you are around and I see you at the weekend, please say hello, masked up or not. It'd be nice to see you in the flesh, as it were. I shall be darting around. I'll obviously be at Tollcross all day on Saturday, but I hope your sons and daughters are in for a good time, a good weekend. And if you've got any feedback, feed it in through them or directly to us at Scottish Swimming. I will certainly do our best to keep improving things. So thank you very much. Enjoy your evening, whatever you're doing, and have a lovely Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you all. Thanks very much.